Hi, good afternoon or evening or morning or whenever you happen to be accessing this resource. Thank you so much for spending some time with me while I talk about smoothing the way, structures for collective working. I'm Jennie Blake. I'm the Head of Teaching and Learning Development at the University of Manchester Library. My role is a new one, recent anyway, for the library, and I focus on all of the teaching and learning and pedagogy that the library gets involved in, but I also have a specific focus around creating the structures and processes for us that can make delivering and creating exemplary teaching and learning services and support possible. So this is going to look a little bit at some of those things. First of all, just so you know what's going to happen during the presentation, the goals for me for this are to touch on the principles and goals for collective work. So what do we mean when we say collective, and what do we hope for in that case? I'm going to talk about the types of processes we need to be in place so that the structure we have can support working in this way, right? So that it's not actively working against it, which is often the case if you don't examine your structures and process. And then finally, I'm going to reflect on the snags and successes so far. How's it gone? Where do we want to go soon and a little bit further down the line in the future? So I hope you enjoy it. So for context, that's Stan. You can go visit him anytime after February 2023 when the Manchester Museum reopens. But like Stan, we're quite big, but hopefully we're not scary. So in context for the University of Manchester and therefore for the University of Manchester Library, it's a very large institution, tens of thousands of students, thousands of members of staff, complex degree programs, but finite numbers of library staff to make sure they get the support that they need. And we're also obviously operating in this new world. So post everyone learning for extended periods off and on from home, we are now moving into a world where flexible and blended learning aren't so much a add-on, but more of a central focus. And for the library, that means that although we've done blended learning and especially blended delivery of our teaching and learning services for a decade now, it was always previously a complement to our face-to-face synchronous or live sessions. Now it's a core leading component. So flexible and blended for us involves asynchronous first, right? It involves focusing on the online in a way we hadn't previously, including delivering live and online. And it involves a level of demand for sustainable and flexible working that we hadn't necessarily encountered previously. And in response to that, we've developed some ways of working. So first of all, I'm going to spend some time defining the word collective. So what do we mean by collective work? Well, we mean that each person is able to bring their experience and expertise in the context of their role and capacity, that's key, to the process and the work that we're doing. There is literally room for everyone in whatever amount of energy, space, and time that they have. And this is really important because it allows for us to access the expertise of someone who might be a very high level expert in a specific area, but not require more engagement than they have time for, capacity for, or in fact, than is appropriate for their role. And collective working, therefore, is actually quite often, especially in our case, collaborative working, where it's a very organic network space and we are all working together on what we're trying to produce. We have collectively come up with a set of principles, more on that later, but we've collectively come up with a set of principles that we adhere to. We collaboratively work to make sure that what we create touches on everyone's expertise, and we as a unit operate as sort of one team as opposed to individuals who might be addressing an individual goal. Now, the benefits for us are that it's very sustainable, which is lovely. We can all work where needed on what is needed. It is quite easy to flexibly deploy staff for us to think, okay, we'll all work on this with this person leading who's an expert, but also at the same time, this person who's working a little bit on this first project can lead on this second project and still pull in the expert lead from the first project, because obviously we're all working together collectively and collaboratively. And then finally, it's more inclusive. So by default assuming that everyone needs to be a part of the process, by default assuming that everyone is going to contribute, we are showcasing the breadth and depth of diversity present in the library and in the students who engage with us and staff who engage with us. And we're also all in it together in a way that allows for inclusivity and accessibility to be built in as opposed to added on or checked for after. Okay. And it shapes our services by making sure that we're not a narrow avenue towards an expert-led answer, or sort of bringing the Muhammad on top of the mountain scenario, but instead there's a broad and welcoming base of support, because working collectively means we can all upskill a little bit, where there's still space then for these very tricky, quite complex top-level problems that do need some specific expertise and experience. Now, the structures that we have in place, and again, can't go into too much detail, only have 10 minutes, but first of all, they require equitable contributions from all participants. So this is, for us, this takes the part of a team space with has a community of practice for everyone to discuss key teaching and learning pedagogies, and it also has a materials and development channel. This means that whatever is being created out in the open. People can attach themselves to something that's being worked on, whether it's a face-to-face training, an online resource, or a combination of the two, or a bigger project, and we can therefore hear everyone's voices, and we also aren't running the risk of forgetting that actually someone has something to say, because everyone has a chance to say something. We're all collaborating using agreed principles and guidance, and that also we have mechanisms for checking. This includes small things. For example, one of our principles is around uplifting the voices of the global majority, and in the guidance we specifically say, have you double checked to make sure that you've used examples that showcase the voices of the global majority. So it can work as two halves of the same whole. We have a principle, we have structure, we work together, and we produce something excellent. And then finally, we also have transparent and consistent reflection built in. That means that there is an assumption that after something is produced in front of everyone, that then it will be reflected on in front of everyone, and we will come to a conclusion about it collectively all together and make decisions that will impact other people's work. So if something went really well, we can imitate it, we can roll it out broader. If something went terribly wrong, we will stop anyone else from making the same mistake twice. And instead of one person learning, we're all learning together. This goes along with our metrics, which we also need to enable us to talk about what we're doing and measure the true picture of the effort put in and the impact of the work that is going on inside the team. Finally, it's very important to note that this is new. So one of the snags, but it's also a success, but one of the snags is that doing something new can sometimes be difficult and awkward when it comes to induction and upskilling people into the teaching and learning students services and team. There is definitely a trend towards having to pick up a usually completely different way of working. For those of us who are much more used to thinking very carefully about ensuring you did it yourself and it was perfect before you showed everyone, it can be quite an uncomfortable experience. However, what does happen is that as you get more used to working in front of everyone and sharing more rapidly and sharing more iterations, then what you produce has a tendency to be higher quality, because obviously what happens is it gets checked earlier, more people can contribute, there's that collective and collaborative element, and therefore there's just more eyes on what you're working on. The next thing is that there are often many stakeholders. So a success there is our ability so far at our university to advocate for library position in quite high-level projects and working groups around teaching, learning, and pedagogy. That's because we can all speak quite confidently, because we all work together on everything, about what we do, why we do what we do, and the impact of what that is. But at the same time, those of you at libraries are aware, I am sure, there are many stakeholders in what we do. So we also need to be able to take a step back, listen to what is needed, and redeploy or reshape perhaps what we're doing in order to make sure it suits what's needed by our staff and students. And then finally, for us moving forward, we need to work on the consistency of approach across our services. So while it is the case, especially in the teaching, learning, and students team and within the teaching and learning support services at the University of Manchester Library, that we do embrace this collective and collaborative model, we do have a structure that supports it. It's not consistently deployed across all of the University of Manchester Library teaching, nor is it, of course, 100% working inside all of those teaching and learning support services. So one thing that we're working on is ensuring that we can differentiate between what is a process issue, maybe something's too onerous, maybe it asks too many questions in a form or something like that, and what is a induction issue, maybe someone doesn't understand what they're meant to do or is uncomfortable sharing, and how can we work with that? And so our goals moving forward are not only to keep improving what we deliver for staff and students, but also internally to reflect on the pedagogy and praxis that we use in terms of our teaching and learning, and how we can continue to improve and understand what it is we do, the impact of what we do, and why we do it that way, in order to keep improving, but also to keep articulating why it's so important. Finally, I know that was a whistle-stop tour, but I wanted to just say thank you. If you want to get in touch to ask me more questions, I'm very easy to find on Twitter. It's at Jennie Rose, and I'm also available via email. I hope you have a lovely day, and thank you very much for listening to me.